After Frege's logical revolution and the establishment of the analytic tradition with Russell, Whitehead, and Moore leading to the linguistic turn in philosophy, the first and most representative group arising in this context was the Vienna Circle, which embraced the paradigm of logical positivism, also known as logical empiricism or neo-positivism, a clear reference to Comte's universal empiricist project, which he also called positivism. The movement, started in 1922, was originally inspired by physicist and philosopher Ernst Mach, after whom the speed of sound is named for his breakthrough studies in the area, and who also was an inspiration to Einstein and the development of the relativity theory, which defended this radical empiricism against metaphysics toward a strictly experience-based epistemology. The group included a wide assortment of members from mathematicians and physicists to historians, sociologists, political economists, and of course philosophers, focusing on research regarding science and epistemology in general. Its founders were philosopher and physicist Moritz Schlick, philosopher and prominent mathematician Hans Hahn, philosopher of science, political scientist, and economist Otto Neurath, and physicist, mathematician, and philosopher Philipp Frank. Other notable members were Rudolf Carnap, Olga Hahn-Neurath, Herbert Fagel, Kurt Gödel, Viktor Kraft, and Friedrich Waismann, among many others, and though not members, some of the frequently discussed authors or occasional visitors were Ludwig Wittgenstein, Karl Popper, Hans Kelsen, Willard Quine, and Ernest Nagel. It is significant that most members were either mathematicians, physicists, logicians, or dabbled in similar sciences, a reflection not only of its initial intent of a greater focus on a scientific approach to philosophy, but also of its success in interdisciplinary dialogue and research. Though an entire series could be dedicated to this group, we will briefly discuss some of its most relevant authors and ideas. Schlick was their main organizer, with ample experience in philosophy of physics, and in both of these individual areas as well, especially in epistemology and philosophy of science in general. He inherited not only Mach's university chair, but his strong anti-metaphysical position, and was one of the first members to defend ethics as a viable area for their logical positivism, as although they depended on subjective evaluations, ethical judgments would always be an objective attempt directed toward maximizing happiness through fulfillment as an ultimate goal. Another important figure in this period, though not a member of the circle, was Ludwig Wittgenstein. His first work, the Tractatus logico-philosophicus, was widely discussed, and he even participated in some meetings. It was the epitome of logical positivism from its writing itself, as it was a book composed by 7 main propositions and several sub-propositions, all interconnected in a logical and objective manner. It establishes logical atomism, or that the simplest facts about the world are representable by simple logical propositions, and language forms a picture of the world through logical connections. These connections could be advanced by scientific endeavor through empirical observation, but ethics, religion, aesthetics, metaphysics, and all subjectivity for him could not associate to any fact about the world, and thus we cannot speak objectively or logically about them. Words with no objective representation and unanalyzable by logic can be neither true nor false, and thus have no meaning. They're verbal nonsense or pseudo-propositions, and we must abstain from talking about it, a strong reflection of the analytic view on ordinary language. Philosophy, however, was filled with this nonsensical verbose as well, and thus philosophy itself primarily dealt with meaningless concepts for him. Even though he required philosophy for developing his ideas, it was as a ladder he used to climb to reach this perspective, being then disposable afterwards, much like the medicine to be purged altogether with the disease perspective of Sextus Empiricus, using argumentation against the valid use of argumentation. This conclusion was applied not only in his research, but also in his personal life, as he abandoned philosophy to pursue gardening and other activities soon after, believing he had reached the end of philosophy. Clearly an extreme logical empiricism viewpoint, it was one of the most relevant works in the area, and thus to the circle as well. Wittgenstein kept in contact through mail with Schlick long after he distanced himself from the group, both physically as well as ideologically, after publishing his second major work, The Philosophical Investigations. Hans Hahn was a great admirer of Wittgenstein's Tractatus, being an avid defender of language and theories being mirrors of experience, widely using it in his classes. Actually, most members of the circle predominantly embraced a version of this extreme logical positivism as it represented their break from tradition along with their focus on science. Hahn-Neurath, the inventor of infographs, had a more sociological perspective on his empiricism, not only in that philosophy had value, but only within scientific research, as well as also valuing the inexact and sociological aspects of science. Philosophy and science were to work together to advance research and our overall knowledge of the world, and also to recognize and analyze the cooperative and contingent aspects of real scientists within a real society, foregoing the notion of an objective, abstract science. He had a holistic perspective on research in that science involves all of its social and historical context, as only through analyzing all areas from language to biology, psychology to physics, and so on, could we achieve actual scientific progress toward the endgame which he dubbed unity of science. Kurt Gödel, a student of Hahn, was a very influential mathematician, known for many major developments, including the incompleteness theorem, which postulates that some true statements in math cannot actually be proven, especially those which involved analysis into infinite amounts. This was representative of his perspective of mathematical Platonism, the realist view that mathematical statements could be objectively true, being then a descriptive science like other empirical sciences, even though they might not be provable. He also defended a rationalist position akin to Leibniz, where, given that mathematics is rife with perfection, so is the entire existence. But this was more of a practical perspective rather than metaphysical, as, for example, philosophy, for him, could acquire methods as precise as mathematics. The last main figure within the Vienna Circle was Rudolf Carnap, who strongly embraced the anti-metaphysics and pro-logical clarity positions of the group, having finessed his position throughout the years until the late 1960s. He went from the circle's intent of replacing ordinary language toward recognizing the value of conceptual engineering, as he called its inclination toward creating new words through association, which characterized most of his and his colleagues' criticism. He thus began valuing idiosyncratic standpoints toward his rational reconstruction, or explication, the act of organizing ordinary language into a logical and objective one. These would be inserted in linguistic frameworks of constructed language to further verify and process into an objective picture of the world. But later in life, he defended that not only one utmost logical language exists, as he and the circle originally believed, but several different ones which interact better within certain contexts, a move also instilled by Gödel's findings. Even metaphysics, synonymous with unverifiable nonsense for him and his colleagues since their early years, gained some of his recognition later as stepping stones toward understanding certain frameworks. The rise of the Nazi Party in Germany dispersed many of the circle members from Vienna, and its spearhead Schlick was tragically shot by a Nazi sympathizer student in 1936. Though further publications continued afterwards, with some of its authors publishing well into the second half of the 20th century, the circle itself was already no longer considered as existing by the 40s. In the next tutorials, we will take a look at Wittgenstein's later works, as well as some of the other members and influenced authors who established analytic philosophy in the second half of the 20th century.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel for more tutorials. Support me on Patreon so I can keep making content. And as always, feel free to email me, ProfessorDaveExplains@gmail.com.